Well, good morning, everybody. Thanks for joining us again for another Tech Tuesday. I thought this month a good one to present was the new features of 4.8. It is out in beta right now. I've had early release of this product and then beta as well. And recently I saw that they did post a tutorial up on Tridium University for the features, so I figured, okay, I can talk about it because of the fact that it's already out there through there. That usually with beta, we usually don't get to talk too much about things until they're released, but I figured it was a good time to cover the three main topics of our three main features that were added in 4.8. And specifically, it's a security dashboard, a client certificate authentication, as well as an application control engine, which has been dubbed ACE. Security dashboard will be the first part we'll talk about, and basically what it allows you, it gives you the ability to look into a station, whether it's a supervisor and then its subordinate stations, at the configuration of the services and how weak security is or how strong it is, and gives you summaries and tips on what you should do to lock it down more. They have what's called a system view if it's a supervisor. Supervisor has a slightly different license than or a feature in the license than a JACE would have, where the supervisor would go out and look at the devices out on the Niagara network, and it would report on all of those as a roll-up summary. And then you could dive in deeper into each of the stations. So if you have a very large, enterprise system, it's a quick way to get a look at, how things are set up, HTTPS versus HTTP, user credentials, things like that, and how secure they might be. So you have what's called a system view to do that roll-up of all the stations, and then you have a station view, which will give the individual services of the station that is selected. The basic layout of the security dashboard, the top part is the summary view, and then you have services cards in the bottom part. And as you can see on this snapshot, we're showing the web service and the user service. The number is an indication of how many items it's alerting you to. Well, not necessarily alerting, but just bringing your attention to. Like here for this, it's showing that there's 2 alerts, 9 warnings. There's 17 items that are okay, and there's 6 informational comments for it. So then at the bottom part in these cards, they'll go into detail. So here's one of the alerts is web service, and there's 7 items for that. And I have HTTP enabled. It's telling you that it's set to true, allowing for a non-secure connection. That's why it's an alert. So you'd want to be able to go in there and change that. So I specifically, on the station, set it up that way so we can show how you could go in and make the changes and how it updates itself. And it goes through and tells you, what certificates are in there, what certificates being used, TLS connection information, certificates are signed, and other, pieces of information. If we look at the next one over under user service, it's telling me that all the users are set up as super user. So typically you're not going to have more than a few, super users, but you're going to have for end users and other users of the system, I'm sure you'd have something less than a super user set up. It tells you, admin's a default user, so it's letting you know, hey, you've got a default user. It's not saying it's an alert, it's just a warning that it's set up that way. It's, the information type things are, passwords expiration is disabled for all the users. The things that Tridium has deemed that will be, areas to adjust to make the system more secure. It's a real simple setup. There's a new palette called NSS, and underneath that there is a security service that you would drop to your services folder on your station. And the security dashboard is the default view for that security service. So if we go over to my workbench, and I just have a real simple, I just have a station with just one Niagara network device, which is my Edge 10. So we can go in here and go under service. Well, first, before we do that, let's go down to palette. There's your NSS palette, and then there's your security service. And that's what gets dropped into your services folder. So now if I click on that, this can be done from a browser or it can be done from within Workbench. Bring this over more. You can see this is a supervisor because I have a system view and I have a station view. So if I click on station view, it's going to look at the services that are within the supervisor itself. If we look at system view, it goes out and looks to see what other devices are out there on the network. So in my case, I actually have two hot water systems. One's the actual one doing our building, and the other one is the one I have on the bench here, as well as the supervisor, the local station for this machine. So from here, I could turn around and go in and see what that hot water system station looks like. Hopefully this comes up. I got this feature for the supervisor enabled last night. So it's the first time I've gone to see if I can get it to go through it from the supervisor out to the edge device, which doesn't look like it's getting there for some reason.
Yeah, it works great.
There may be a feature I need to put out there because when I know when I dropped it on that Edge 10 the other day, I had the same thing. So it's something that's not set up properly in my Edge device because when I go in there, I get the same blank screen. So we'll concentrate on we'll just go back and look at the supervisor station. If we go back here. But at least from this view, we can still see that station and some of the alerts, warnings, and the such for that device. Now, if we go down and look at our supervisor, down here we have 34 items. So we've got one item here that says that the HTTP is enabled, set to true. So I can go into that supervisor.
Just by clicking on the object.
Mm-hmm. And now I'm moved into the station view of the supervisor, and it says, okay, your HTTP enable is set to true, so I can click on web service, go in there and say, all right, I want to, I'll disable that. It doesn't like it, so we'll disable that and we'll go back.
Pretty cool.
And there's one less alert now. Let's see what else is it telling us. There should be, I've moved over here. So web service, it's saying HTTP set to false, but the HTTPS is still enabled. Okay, so it's saying it's okay because we do have it set up that way. What other things do we have? An HTTPS minimum protocol is TLS 1.0, certificate is self-signed. So I think we're okay there. But you can see how it updated itself once I made that change. Let's see what else we have down below there. Box service, platform settings. Goes through and checks your module signatures as well.
The Tridium certificate considered unsafe?
I don't think it's considered unsafe. It's
Just a
not ideal.
Yeah.
Like, it would be
It's just-
more secure if you had a signed certificate.
Yeah, if they thought it was, it would have been listed as an alert.
Most people use the Tridium.
Right. And you could also go in here, and if you wanted, if you're really looking for the important things, the things that aren't right, you could go and filter out and hide, like the informational part and the OK part, and just have the specific alerts and warnings show up to make it easier to quickly glance through how things are in your system.
I think you got a chat message.
Where is that?
WebEx.
Let's see. You guys can unmute yourselves you don't need to do it through chat. We can actually talk. Scott, was that comment before? I guess so you are able to hear us, I assume.
Yes, I am. I think the TLS one is I don't know if it's old or deprecated or whatever, so that's probably what that warning is for.
This one here.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, they prefer you to use 1.1, I believe.
Oh, okay. So if we were to go back in here and go here, we could go in here and change it to 1.1 or 1.2. Okay, thank you. So if I were to go like that.
Yeah. And then go back.
And then go back, we just whittle down another.
Right.
Yeah, now it became an okay. So if you didn't want to confuse things and have that part, just hide it and just have the important information in there. So it's a quick way of checking. And I guess the one big thing about this is if you have a enterprise site, we have universities and things like that are out there. We have multiple contractors working on. It's an easy way for somebody, whether it's the main person for the owner or if there's a master integrator, to be able to go in on the supervisor and see across all JACEs, all edges, any Niagara device, to see how security is set up. So if you've got multiple contractors, they're not all going to do it the exact same way. So at least it's a way to look into the system to see what everybody's doing and to be able to make changes. Or if you don't want to make those changes, all you're going to do is maybe recommend that those specific contractors make those changes. It's a place to get some screenshots and send the information out to people to make those changes. Or, as you can see, you can make those changes yourself.
Good way to audit your network.
Yeah. Because it's amazing with all the different support, remote sessions that we do. It's amazing how many there are out there that are still trying to use default usernames and passwords. And I know Tridium's done a good job about getting rid of the default platform passwords. But still, it's, people complain about that and say, well, we should be able to make it whatever we want. Well, they're trying to make you do it secure, so you don't want the defaults in there.
Nice feature.
Any questions or anything else you want to see on this piece? Okay, and we'll move on to the next part. And I know the question's going to come up, and I don't have an answer for when 4.8 is going to release. I haven't seen anything yet on what the release date is.
It's September.
Is that what you heard? Yeah. Is that from the training you were at last week? Okay. Which makes sense. They're finishing up their beta. It's been in beta for probably 2 months now, a month and a half.
Which means Tridium should be ahead of it.
Well, Tridium would be September, which then means, each of the brands would come after that. Yeah. And the next thing I wanted to touch on was the client certificate authentication. And basically ever since, I want to say, I guess it stopped in AX, or I guess earlier on in AX, they didn't get rid of the kiosk mode, the guest user account, but they disabled it and you had to get a special free license feature, but you had to ask for it to enable the guest account, which is basically for auto login. So that if you have like a kiosk set up, the browser will automatically log into the system without requesting, the credentials. So what they've done with 4.8 is they added the ability to use client certificates to authenticate, for the server to authenticate the user and automatically log in. So you can do a kiosk type of application. And as you can see here, the screenshot is showing where if you have a user set up with the client certificate authentication, you're going to select that on the login dialog box. And if you do remember my choice, after you do this piece, anytime you, from that browser, when you go to that IP address, it's going to automatically log in. Or if you have that as your home screen or whatever on that browser, it'll automatically start up and run. Basically, the way that's set up is you have your client certificates that identify the user or machine for gaining access to the server, in this case, the Niagara server. And then it builds the trust between that client and server. The certificate's created and a copy is placed in both the client and the server, where the private key part goes to the client or the browser, and the public key part stays within the server. And then the server will authenticate the client based on that.
Is the key password protected?
Yes.
Every time?
Yeah, when you create that key, you're password protected.
And you move it?
Yeah. And then different browsers do it different ways and require different formats. I put down the basic procedure for doing it, and for using Chrome. The standard certificates that Niagara uses are PEM file extensions, and Chrome uses PFX. So you have to use a conversion tool. OpenSSL is what's recommended, and can be used to do that conversion. It's not the simplest form. We were able to get through it and get it set up, but it was, it's not just a matter of copying that file into Chrome, since it doesn't use the format that we're used to using in Niagara. But basically, there's your certificate management tool in Niagara, where you're going to create your certificate, your client certificate, and you're going to be exporting it twice, once with the private key and once without the private key. And so once for the server and once for the client. Once you do that, you're going to turn around, and because you create that, there's going to be a new client authentication scheme that you select for each user that you want to do that with. And I'll show that live on in the station. But basically, there's an under the authentication service, you're adding, I got a typo there, you're adding this client certificate authentication scheme from the client cert authentication palette, so that when you go to that user, you can select that as the scheme, so it knows to look for that when you're logging in. And as I mentioned with Chrome, it requires a PFX, so you have to use a tool to do that conversion. And once you log in, if you do that Remember My Choice, every time you bring up that browser for that URL, it'll automatically log in for that station only. So if we look at that, you have the client certificate authentication palette, and there's a new scheme there. And then you take that, and underneath your, where is it? Underneath authentication, you have your authentication scheme. So you drop this new scheme under there, and it's now available. So this way, when you go into your user service, and you pick a user, you're going in here, the authentication scheme. If we go back and look at my admin user, the authentication scheme is digest scheme is the default that gets used. So then what you're going to do for a user that you're going to have be the automatic login, you're choosing that client authentication scheme. And you'll see that once I had the certificates created, you're going down to the authenticator and you're choosing that certificate. And again, this is the server part, so you're actually bringing in your public one. So if I were to go to the certificate management form, that would be this key here is the one I created. You would select that, and that would be associated with that user. Now, for creating that certificate, under Tools, you have your Certificate Management tool. And this is where you would go in and select New. You put in your alias, the organization name, you know, the required areas. And then from there, you're going to turn around and you're going to export that to be able to be used for the server and also used for the browser. So then when you go through and use a browser, if we go in, I believe it's, my address isn't changing. I did it wrong. I got a 0 in there. Not sure how I did that, but there we are. Saying, okay, that's the certificate I'm using. You would come in. I would just, not sure why it didn't work. Should have just logged in because I'd already set it up. And log in. On there, let me log back out because it should have. That's still doing the same way.
You logged out. You're logging in.
Right, but it should have just automatically brought me into this. I don't have a, what's that? I don't have a PX page set up on here, so it's just going to my nav tree.
You're saying that it has to stay logged in?
Yeah, I think he logged out before when he was setting this up.
Log off.
Yeah, that could
Since he physically told it to log out, it logged him out, right?
So
he
that
had
first
to do the
time it
first step
requires-
to log in.
So if we go here and I set up another user. Go here. User 2. Save. Client scheme.
Kiosks don't normally have a keyboard, right? So there's
Usually it's like a touch screen.
Yeah.
So is there a security breach? So if you have even though you have exchanged certificates and key locks, is there not a security breach being logged in all the time?
Well, I think
They give you limited access with.
I think that's the intention. Like you're locked down to just one PX page that doesn't have.
So I'll pull in that certificate and click OK.
It's that even. Yeah.
So now if I come back in here,
Yeah.
and now I change my user.
I'm trying to wrap my head around the intent of the developers here with this feature.
It's a more secure way than using it.
It's the certificate we want to use. Remember and log in.
But also.
So now it should be that if I close this window, I open it back up again, it should automatically log in as a certificate, and it didn't come up and ask me for my credentials, and it just automatically logged me in. But again, if it's, using it as a kiosk, obviously you're not going to set up the user for admin rights like I just did. It's going to be some, subset. I don't know, even whether you're going to do invoke or write or whatever, but usually it's just to show dashboards and things like that, to be able to have people navigate around to look at different things, not change things. But that's basically the ins and outs of this client certificate authentication. Again, it was geared towards doing that automatic login. I think there's more and more, I guess, a use of public kiosks or displays to show.
High-end homes with touch displays.
Yeah, that would be a good example of that. Any questions on that? Make sure there's not. See the chats there. All right. Then the main part, or the other part that I wanted to make sure we cover, and this is really more of a continuation on from the Edge 10 training we did a few months ago, where back then they talked about doing what's part of ACE, but it's finally been implemented. And basically, the application control engine is designed to work with the Edge 10 devices. I'm not aware, and right now they're just talking about it only for the Edge 10s. It is a separate control engine that is running concurrently with Niagara. So as Niagara's control engine is booting up, the application control engine is doing the same thing. The difference is the application control engine will be up and running in 12 to 15 seconds. Just my basic playing around with it, I timed it every time to be 11 to 12 seconds. And that's with a couple points in there. So I think when they say 12 to 15, and 15 seconds is more if you have a larger application that it's going to run. You know, it'll be running within that time frame. So it's the main thing with this is it's making it more like a regular DDC controller that you apply power and it's up and running within, 10, 20 seconds or whatever. It's also a deterministic control. So each component will execute in a specific order, and it's the cycle time of it, there's a specific time frame that it runs as well. So you know exactly what's going to happen when with that application.
Is the time frame selectable?
I'm not sure if it is or not. I haven't delved that deep to see. But I think with, the engine that's in there, the processor and all that, it's going to be a pretty quick. It's not like the XL10 days where like 10 seconds or whatever. But the deterministic control was something I guess a lot of people have been asking for. I think the bigger piece was this fast startup was a big problem where you got a large, like a chill water system or something. If you have a power bump, you don't have to wait that 5 minutes for the Jace to start up to be able to start controlling it, or have the Edge 10 take 3 to 5 minutes to boot up before it starts controlling. What they've done is with the Edge 10, you've had the Edge IO network. That would be the network that's set up under drivers that you do your logic for the Edge 10 control. That was using the old Niagara runtime engine. That gets replaced with a new network called ACE Edge network, and it's part of the ACE Edge palette. So you got to remove the one, put the other in. And one of the biggest changes is that they added another sidebar similar to palette, but they call it catalog. And that's where the components are for doing your programming. So you can't use any of your Niagara components within the ACE Edge network. So you have to use the components that are part of this ACE catalog, and we'll go through that. I'll show it to you live. And then the tools required for programming, they have a ACE application tool that allows you to program offline. And then you can download to the Edge devices. You can upload out of the Edge devices, but you can program it offline and then push it to your devices. And the ACE folder is in the user home, similar to like the certificate management folder sitting there. The application menu, as I just mentioned, allows you to download, upload, and save. So if you first go into your nav tree and you go down to the local device, which is the actual control, you're not going to see the app, the ACE app show up. You have to actually go in, right-click on local device, and go to ACE application and say View Application. And then that will load up and you'll see the wire sheet. And the wire sheet is a cyan blue to show that it's not the same wire sheet as a standard Niagara wire sheet, so you know you're working in a different type of wire sheet. And you have your download, upload, and save application as part of this. It's all live, real-time programming, just like when you're programming in Niagara. And the way you integrate it to work with Niagara code is through proxy points. So you still have a proxy point coming in from that local device. So you're basically creating a proxy point in your Niagara part of the Edge 10.
Pass-throughs.
Right, and that's where you'll have your schedules and your other logic passing, data back and forth between controllers. So that still gets done on the Niagara network. But as far as the actual control application, it's going to be done underneath the new style of that new Ace Edge network.
So if you have a set point to control something, that has to go to a pass-through and then to the graphic?
Well, it's got to go to a proxy point, just like you do any other device. You always have a proxy point to bring it up into a graphic from a controller.
So Ace is basically treated like its own controller, essentially.
And the same thing when it was just an Edge 10 device without this.
Right.
You still had a proxy point that you were using to display.
The set point.
Right. So you'll
That on that network, on the ACE network, can that proxy, the numeric writable be used in the graphic, or does that have to be?
yeah, that's still off that proxy point.
Okay, so that's what I was asking. It's not a special ACE proxy.
No. Now, if we go,
Physical points have to be passed through.
yeah, everything's a proxy point coming through. So now if we go out, I'm going to close my supervisor. If I go down and look at I have a Edge 10 sitting here on the bench. And it currently is it's the same as our hot water. We have an Edge 10 here doing our hot water system. So right now this is running a standard Edge 10 application. So if I go into the Edge IO network and I go underneath my local network, I've got my points, standard points, and then under there I have a folder that I have with all my logic. So here's my application. And this is using standard Niagara kit control type components. So now in order to use this with the ACE, with the application control engine, I have to reprogram it. There's no conversion. And you have to use the components that are available in that the ACE catalog. It's very similar to a kit control, and you'll see this, but there are going to be some areas that are different. For whatever reason, they covered most of the components, like this reset block doesn't exist in the category, in the catalog, I mean. So I had to actually recreate that with standard math blocks to do the reset. So that was one area that you'll see that's different. The pinning slots and using composite, they don't work within that environment at this point. It's stuff that I fed back when I was doing the beta on it last month, and they haven't worked out as possible, something that they would look at doing. But there had been reasons they kept them out. I'm not privy to that. It just makes it so much easier to be able to put your code under a folder and then composite things out, so it looks like it's just a standard component at that point. So as I mentioned, it's a new sidebar. So if we go to Windows sidebar, there's ACE catalog. So now if we look at that ACE catalog, you'll see that each of the folders is very similar to what you have in kit control. So you've got math in there and, logic and, but then they also have the points, specific points for it. You have your IO points are under here. There's conversion tables for your analog inputs and the such. So that's that part of it. So in order to work with this, we actually are going to have to delete this Edge IO network and put in the other, which was underneath palette, which which is the ACE Edge. So there's that ACE Edge network that we need to be able to work with. So
Can't pull the network out of the catalog? Can't pull the network out of the catalog?
there is no edge. That's separate. That's not part of the catalog. Catalog is your control components. This is the actual device or your network. So from that, that's because this is the Niagara side.
Like Spider.
This is the Niagara side here. So if I delete the, I'm going to go ahead and delete that Edge I/O network, I would have to come in here and drop in this new network. And then if I go in and look, there's my local device. I can turn around and say ACE application, view application. Well, it's brand new, so there isn't anything in there except for one object. I don't know why it's so small, but it has its own services folder. Now from here, I could turn around and go back to my ACE catalog and build my logic. You know, I could put in my, you know, I've got an analog input. I can, you know, do all that. But what I want to do is I want to turn around and go here, ACE application. I'm actually going to download an application that I already have created. So if I say download, it's going to go to the default ACE folder, and I say, okay, where's my new hot water control? Open, and drop that in. Not sure why it kicked me out, but okay. So there you have the same application, but I rebuilt it using the ACE catalog components. So I pointed out that the reset. So my reset logic is right here, and you'll see I don't have any no nice little links to slots that show my, you know, composited slots. So if I go in here, there's my logic that recreated that reset, and you know, I do have my links going back out, but not represented in a way that makes it easy to read, you know, what you're doing there.
Links still show up on the bottom, don't they?
What's that?
Links still show up on the bottom, don't they?
On the bottom?
You hover over the node.
Oh, over here, yes. You do have that, yeah, you do have that, but you don't have anything on the folder itself that everything's under. Right. And you'll see you have, like in my case here, here's hot water temperature. Actually, let's pick, I think I have outside air temperature. I have a little thermistor on there. Like here's the outside air temperature. It's UI1. That actually is pulling from the ACE-IO. And then I'm going through and using the conversion here to convert it to a 20K MTC. So it's like, you know, set that up there. I had to put a multiplier of 1,000 because it's actually reading, you know, 1,000 ohms instead of just reading in, you know, the proper amount, which is different than how it's done in the standard Edge, or, you know, you don't have to do that.
It's more work.
Right. So, and as I said, you have to use those, the only components that can be used are what's in this catalog. But, you know, most of it's very similar, like I said, to kit control, but there are some places where they're missing objects here and there. I don't think they even realized they missed the OA reset, or the reset block. And, you know, they went back and checked, and, you know, they added that. I wouldn't be surprised if that gets added in. But the compositing part and the pin slots isn't something that's going to be, I think, added anytime soon. But the thing is, this logic here, you power up, you know, first time powering up, you get a power blip, whatever. This controller, this logic right here will be up and running in 12 seconds. Not way, and then Niagara's still coming up in the background. You're not going to see your graphics and all that stuff until the Niagara part's back up, but at least your application is up and running.
What does the configuration of the UI look like? standard slots that you just.
Right, and then you got your point index, so which point number it is, and then which mode is it voltage or resistance.
Gotcha.
And you can see they changed the color and the tab color, so you know you're working within ACE.
Hey, Frank,
Yeah,
can logic be saved in a palette? Just like we do with Niagara stuff?
the application itself can be saved. But as far as taking logic that you create, I am not sure. Let's try it. We say, okay, we need this. To save it to a palette, I mean, we can try. I'm not going to go to that extent right now, but I can at least see if I could save it, and if it saves it as like a BOG file or something. Let's see what happens if I do this. If I could do this, then I would say the answer would be yes, it can be. There's a reset. If I take this, drop it there. Yeah.
Okay, good.
Looks like that mechanism would be there. Good question.
All right.
Hey, Frank,
Yeah.
can your ACE Edge network and the Edge IO network coexist under drivers until you?
They cannot.
They
They
cannot.
will-
So
they
you do
cannot.
have to delete one before you can have the other.
Correct.
So you're better off saving your station, looking
I-
at it online or offline, and then recreating your logic.
Yeah, you want to make sure you have a good backup too.
Right. Thank you.
Mhm. Yeah, I did try that because I was trying to, I wouldn't say I was trying to find an easy way of, so I could compare what I was working on, but it definitely doesn't work when you do it that way. So you have to have one or the other.
Did he yell at you?
Very good.
It comes up, I don't remember exactly what it was.
You trying to break
I think it just doesn't work. No, I do try different things, yeah. Yeah, if I'm asked to kick the tires, I'm going to
break it?
I'm going to put spikes on the tips of my boots. Let's see what else we got to say. Just looking to see what else is in here to. I'm sure these are all areas that.
So it's the standard like T-stat and loop point stuff and the same integration constants and mathematics that you use to generate throttling range and integration and stuff like that?
Yeah, you still have your HVAC logic in here. It's the same loop. Because I took screenshots of my existing application and then used that to then rebuild this exactly the same. And the calculations, the way that the integral and derivative and throttling range work is exactly the same. If we go down and we look at our.
And yet another programming environment.
And I still do the same thing on my throttling range and integral time. I do the calculation so the value we enter is what we're used to doing with the Honeywell stuff. It's standard throttling range, standard integral time. I'm an old, it's easier to.
Jack, what are those again? 30 and 300?
30 and 300.
So then from there, you go to your points, and we can turn around and say discover. And each point has a folder, and you bring in your output to bring it in and show it. What I can do now is I'll just go into our actual live controller. Here's the are the points there. If we go in and look like the, let's see, OA temp. Actually, let's go in and look at the proxy of it. You know, the component name and so all that information's there. And again, since it's a, since it is a, oh, there it was. It's the Edge 10 device. It serves up its own graphics, so you still have your, you know, just like a Chase would be. You have your, you have all that at your fingertips. You got your, you know, all the, you know, alarming and your histories and everything else are all in there like you would.
Goes into the same.
The, so we got the, I said the points. If we look at the wire sheet of that, and you'll see we have our, you know, our OC mode, so we have our link going out to our logic. It's actually across the Niagara network to our building Jace to be occupied, unoccupied, so we know when the units are running in the system and when there's a heating call. So all the links get done, again, through these proxy points that then get passed through to the application. So it'll be interesting to see over time what wins out if you're using an Edge 10. You know, is everybody going to be using the application control engine so they get this fast startup and work with that catalog of components, or do they stay into a standard kit control because you have everything there and everybody's used to working with that? I mean, it's.
Well, I think like most programmers are gonna, you're starting out with a brand new library again. You're gonna rebuild it.
Right.
He likes doing that.
And it'll get used those times where you really do need something up and running right away. You know, for local control, I guess more critical type of things. I mean, what do you all think on that part of it? How necessary is it to have this, you know, application control engine to start up so quickly versus having to wait 3 to 5 minutes?
I don't see the wait being that much of a problem in most cases. Yeah, I think, like you said, we're going to see jobs where we absolutely cannot have this stuff shut down for 3 or 5 minutes.
Right. Yeah, it all depends.
What's the startup time?
I've timed it at 12 seconds. What I did with my application, I have somewhere in here, right there, I just have a digital output go true when the application's running. So the Edge 10 has the 4 digital outputs have an LED on the front, on the face of the controller. So I was just timing to when that LED turns on, meaning it completed its first cycle of the application. And it was 11 to 12 seconds. I mean, of course, that was the first thing I tested when I got my beta license and all that, and my Edge 10s were betaed. I blank program, true block, digital output block, cycle power, how quickly does it come back? And I was actually pleasantly surprised to see it really did work that quickly. Could you run over in my bag, please? I figured I got enough battery this morning.
Now you had the PCG controllers. You timed that as well.
Yeah, the VAV ones were like 45 seconds or so because they had to go through the synchronization and all that stuff and then start up. Spiders were at like 15 to 20 seconds, I think, if I remember right. So they all take a little bit of time to come up and get running. But there's going to be, applications that are going to require you to do it quickly like that, and it's going to be, for whatever reason, may need to be a Niagara-type device. So you do get the best of both worlds in that regard. And the same thing with the deterministic control. I mean, I've heard guys talk about it, I got to have it, but I know I haven't really seen any use cases where not having it hasn't caused any issues, but I'm sure there's certain applications that are going to require it. Process. Right, more industrial or process type control. But you'll see I guess I could point that out, you'll see the block number, that's how you know which block is object ID. Yeah, the object ID is giving it the order. And realistically, I didn't even look at that part of it when I was setting it up, but you have your reorder where you can reorder, each of the blocks if you need to do that.
I guess people are seeing it in specs because everybody made a big deal out of this deterministic control in the last couple of years.
And I know I've heard a lot of people complain about.
Greg?
Yes, sir.
When you do your spider programming, do you go through and reorder your logic?
No.
No?
Negative. No.
Okay.
Yeah, I've never had to do that myself. I did have some timing issues on one site many years ago, and that resolved it, but it was probably more the way I programmed it. It might not have been the way it should have been done. I don't know.
It's HVAC. It's not.
It's not process control.
Yeah, exactly. And, to be honest, I'm lazy, so it's something that probably should be done for the correct logic to fire in the correct order, but I'm lazy, so I don't go back and do that step.
Yep, I'm obsessive, so I do it. I was just curious.
We figured with that question, you do.
Yeah.
You get a gold star, Jack.
Yeah. So that was really what I wanted to show this morning. I'm not sure if there's any other comments or questions. One thing that they did post in the last, I'd say 2 weeks, 3 weeks, there is a free tutorial on Tridium University that covers these 3 topics. Brent Lowe, the product manager, goes through each of them. That's where I pulled a lot of the information for the first 2 parts. No questions or comments on that?
No, guess we'll have to wait for it to come out. Right.
Now now is usually a part of the thing where topics. So you have new things or questions or concerns or things you found that you want to discuss. I mean, the floor's open for all that stuff now.
Related to this.
So I can't think of anything that was burning or that that has been occurring. I mean, there is the one thing, and it's Honeywell specific, and it's something that's been around for well over a year now, is the depth display that shows up on the TR-42s when you're working with the BACnet Spider with relays. I'm not sure if any of you guys have seen that, but the scenario is, it comes up and says death 110 or something like that.
Death by proxy.
And another one is death by proxy. We've had it about 1.5 years ago at a school in a gymnasium where it came up on there, and it kind of, I guess, freaked out some people. But the gist of it is, if you're using a Spider with relays, the BACnet one, with the TR-42, and you use the occupied override button, That's where it makes it come up. There's a new firmware. There's the reflash tool that came out about a year ago, I guess it is now, has the latest firmware. It's the 27.17 firmware that's bad, or that has that issue in it. The 27.18 is the fix for it, and it's been in the reflash tool for, like I said, over a year now. And it's only an issue in that scenario, and it only happens to some. So if you were to use the reflash tool, flash that controller, then the issue goes away. We found out recently that the factory didn't start implementing this new firmware until it was 1923. So it was like the middle of June or end of June. They started using that firmware. And yeah, I said a year ago they had to fix. Yet it wasn't put in the firmware for the factory until June. Because we had a few instances in the last couple weeks of it popping up. It's rare, but it's out there. I mean, it can occur. Now, of course, it's always going to be public space, because if you're using an occupied override button, it's because somebody wants the unit to come on.
And that's just the TR-42s?
That's correct.
Spider Relay TR-42. Yeah, and we, of course, had a customer with 20-something of them. It was a real problem.
No.
I mean, it's an easy check. If you look at the minor version, when you do a discovery of the points and you look at the minor version point, if it's a 17, then it needs to be flashed. It needs to be an 18 to be correct. But other than that, control, it works fine.
Okay, and shipping spiders have the new firmware?
Yeah, we had one case of before that, but we had a case and a few. I flashed the few in the case we sent back, and we're getting a replacement. But everything else, we've got like 6 cases of the later date code. So yeah, what we're shipping out is good at this point.
Honeywell has a warranty pass. Also, I thought you said
they do for unused controllers, not opened. But this, that reflash is what's really required to clean that up. Trying to think of what else there might have been. I don't have anything else really that came up as an oddity or things that we should, that we need to get out there. I mean, we found in Johnson Controls with the wireless network, if the controller starts going offline with the WNC and it reconnects, or if the controller, I guess, in the field goes down and reconnects, the BACnet pole service does another connection to poles. So you got poles on top of poles. Even though one has already been sent out, a message has been sent out, it sends out new ones. So if you look at the normal count or the slow count or fast count, depending on what you're using, a count is, I always thought that was a point count. It's a thread, it's a message count. I guess it can pull multiple points in one message. So it's been seen at like 400, 500. I think in one instance, Greg Wilmer told me it was like 2,000, which was clobbering the network. And he said with 7 months of working with Tridium, they finally came out with a workaround, I guess it is. You can create a slot within the BACnet pole service that you add this slot and you put a -1 in there and it disables it from doing that. And that apparently took care of the problem. It's just like, a bizarre thing, and it was an anomaly with these WNC wireless devices is where it was found. So I don't know, at some point, and we're working with a contractor right now that has some similar stuff, and I'm assuming if they can prove that this is a fix or this is the workaround, that there'll be a bulletin or something that'll be coming out. But I thought it was kind of interesting how that came about.
Sort of like a broadcast almost.
Yeah. All right, well, nothing else? Nobody has any burning topics they want to discuss? Brett, you're awful quiet out there. All right, well, I guess we can call it a wrap for this month, and if you have any ideas on, future topics, please email me and let us know, what you're thinking, what would be good. At some point in the next couple months, we're going to probably do certificates, SSL certificates.
That would be good.
Detail on that.
Is Matt still working on his tagging Uber station?
Yes, I am.
So we can and hierarchies and the whole gambit of all this stuff that nobody's probably using.
Exactly. Yeah,
Okay,
that's
looking
coming
forward
up
to
soon as well.
How about analytics?
Yeah, at some point we'll do something with that.
Okay,
And it was
just kind of
really
curious if there. I'm sorry, go ahead. I was going to say, I'm just curious as to whether we're not using this stuff, is it untapped potential here or a lot of extra stuff that has its place but not in our day-to-day operations? With the tagging and the analytics and all.
Yeah, I mean, there was Honeywell did a Niagara Analytics webinar last week, or maybe it was the week before. But last week they released the link to get to the webinar recording, and they actually it was pretty good. It was the guy from I'm going to chop up his name if I even try to say it. It was the Tridium Niagara Analytics lead person, I guess you could say. I've seen him do other presentations for customers, and he geared this one around webs, but it was really the same thing. And I had a copy of his demo station from probably close to a year ago, and Friday afternoon or over the weekend, he had sent me his updated one that he used for that webinar, and actually it's really good. I want to try to dissect it, take it apart, and yeah, I'd like to do one of these sessions will be on Niagara Analytics, so we can start going through some of those things. I mean, because you figure every Niagara device does have a license for, I think it's 25 points. So you can do a lot with analytics with those 25 points. I know Vince Kelly's been going out and working with contractors, showing them some of it. But this guy from the person from Tridium that did it last week did a really nice job. And there were two parts to it. One was his part, and one was I don't know who the guy is from Honeywell. It was like the salesy part of it. It was more the technical stuff with the Tridium guys that I think the better part. And they have both of those recordings up. And I guess we probably should do is on the BP Tech Center, maybe do a section for that so that you can have a link to get to it as well. Rather than being an email blast from me with the links, at least there'll be some place that you can go back to and look. So you get bombarded enough from emails from me, I guess.
Never enough from you, Frank. I haven't seen. I'm sorry?
I say you're in trouble now.
I'd be interested in seeing, those videos. And is the station freely shareable, or is that just between you and the Honeywell guy?
Oh, I heard come out of his mouth during the session that he was going to make it available. So when I saw the email come out with the video recording links, I shot him an email right away. And I made reference to what he sent me last year, and he sent it to me right away. So he didn't say anything about not sharing it. So yeah, that'll be something I should be able to share.
Okay, because it'd be nice to have a heads up of when you plan on discussing it, and if if I can look at the station beforehand, then I'll be chock full of questions.
Right. Yeah, I'm the same way. I like to dissect and reverse engineer things, you know, look at the final results and then try to peel away at it to see how it was done and, you know, what can be done. Because I know, you know, the way I do it, the way you do it, the way he does it, there are going to be 3 different ways in most cases. It's always more than one way of doing it. So.
All right.
Okay.
I'll look forward to those days.
Very good. And thank you to everybody for attending and hanging on there to the bitter end. And anything comes up, please reach out to us. We're here to help any way we can. And with that, have a good month.
Yep, you too. Thanks.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.